The storm rolled in just as Emily Carter approached the gates of Blackwood Cemetery, the iron bars groaning under the weight of time and rust. She gripped her flashlight tightly, its beam cutting through the thick fog that clung to the ground. The cemetery was vast, its tombstones stretching endlessly into the darkness. She had been here before, years ago, but never at night. Emily wasn't one to believe in ghost stories, but tonight wasn't about belief, it was about closure. Her younger brother, Sam, had disappeared a decade ago on a dare to spend the night in this very graveyard. His body was never found, and his fate had remained a haunting mystery in her family. Now, 10 years later, she had received an anonymous letter with a chilling message: "If you want answers, come to Blackwood Cemetery at midnight." Despite her fear, Emily couldn't ignore the possibility that someone knew what had happened to Sam. Clad in a thick jacket and boots, she stepped through the gates, the wind howling behind her as if trying to warn her away. The cemetery was eerily silent except for the crunch of her boots on the gravel path. Statues of angels loomed like silent sentinels, their faces streaked with moss and rain. As Emily ventured deeper, her flashlight flickered, casting shifting shadows on the tombstones. She stopped to shake it, the beam returning to life with an almost reluctant hum. A faint whisper carried on the wind, barely audible over the rustling leaves. She froze, her heart pounding. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling. No answer. She pressed on, her eyes scanning the names etched into the stones. Some were so weathered they were unreadable, while others seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. As she turned a corner near an old oak tree, she saw something that made her stomach churn: a fresh grave, its earth damp and unsettled. Kneeling by the grave was a figure, cloaked in black. The hood obscured their face, but their posture was unnervingly still. Emily's breath hitched. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice cracking. The figure didn't move for a long moment. Then, slowly, they rose, their movements stiff and unnatural. When they finally turned to face her, Emily gasped. The hood fell back, revealing a face she hadn't seen in 10 years, Sam. But it wasn't him. Not really. His skin was pale, his eyes sunken and lifeless, and his mouth curled into a chilling grin. "Emily," he said, his voice layered with an echo that didn't belong to him. "You shouldn't have come." Her legs felt like lead as she stumbled backward, her flashlight falling to the ground. "Sam," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. He stepped closer, his movements jerky, as if he were a puppet on invisible strings. "You left me here," he said, his voice laced with accusation. "You didn't come for me." Emily shook her head violently. "No, we searched for you. We never stopped." The wind picked up, carrying with it more whispers, hundreds of them, swirling around her like a storm. She clapped her hands over her ears, but the voices grew louder. "She abandoned us. She doesn't belong here. Make her pay." The earth beneath her feet began to shift, cracks forming in the ground as skeletal hands clawed their way to the surface. The graves were waking, their occupants stirred by her presence. "Run," Sam said, his tone suddenly urgent. "You need to run, Emily." Ignoring the terror gripping her chest, Emily grabbed her flashlight and bolted. The whispers followed her, growing louder with each step. Shadows flitted between the tombstones, their forms barely distinguishable from the fog. She stumbled over a tree root, crashing to the ground. As she scrambled to her feet, a skeletal hand shot out from the dirt, gripping her ankle with inhuman strength. Emily screamed, kicking at it until it released her. Ahead, she saw a mausoleum, its heavy stone door slightly ajar. With no other options, she sprinted toward it, slamming the door shut behind her. The whispers faded, replaced by an oppressive silence. Inside, the air was damp and cold. Her flashlight illuminated rows of dusty urns and ancient carvings on the walls. At the far end of the room, a single coffin rested on a stone platform. She approached cautiously, her every instinct screaming at her to leave. But something drew her forward, a faint light seeping through the cracks of the coffin's lid. As she reached out to touch it, the lid slid open on its own. Inside was not a body, but an ornate mirror, its surface swirling with shadows. The whispers returned, emanating from the glass. Emily leaned closer, mesmerized. The shadows coalesced into a scene, her childhood home, her family gathered around the dinner table. Then, the image shifted to the night Sam disappeared. She saw him enter the cemetery, laughing with his friends, daring each other to go further. But as they approached the well in the center of the grounds, Sam hesitated. The scene blurred, and when it cleared, Emily saw something climb out of the well, a dark, twisted figure with glowing red eyes. It lunged at Sam, dragging him into the darkness. The mirror's surface shattered, and Emily stumbled back. Behind her, the mausoleum door creaked open. Standing there was Sam, his expression no longer twisted but full of sorrow. "It won't let me go," he said. "It wants you now." Before Emily could respond, the shadows from the mirror began to seep into the room, pooling around her feet. They climbed her legs, cold and suffocating, pulling her toward the coffin. She fought against them, but they were relentless. "Sam, help me," she cried. His face contorted with pain. "I can't," he said, his voice breaking. "The only way to stop it is to break the cycle." Realizing what he meant, Emily reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the lighter she always carried. With trembling hands, she flicked it on and threw it at the mirror's remains. The flames erupted instantly, consuming the shadows. The whispers turned into anguished screams as the dark presence recoiled. The mausoleum shook violently, the walls cracking as the entity was forced back into the well from which it came. Sam gave her one last, sorrowful look. "Thank you," he whispered, before his form dissolved into light. When the shaking stopped, Emily found herself outside the cemetery gates, the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon. The letter, the DVD, the cursed whispers, they were gone, as if they had never existed. But as she turned to leave, she noticed something in the dirt, her name carved into the earth. Emily walked away, knowing she had ended the curse but at a great cost. The cemetery was silent once more, but she would never forget the price of its secrets.